What is the most horrifying fact you know? Story 1. Japanese human experimentation during WW2. To determine the treatment of frostbite, prisoners were taken outside in freezing weather and left with exposed arms, periodically drenched with water until frozen solid. The arm was later amputated. The doctor would repeat the process on the victim's upper arm to the shoulder. After both arms were gone, the doctors moved on to the legs until only a head and torso remained. The victim was then used for plague and pathogens experiments. Story 2. At any time, one of the proteins in your brain can misfold and cause a prion disease, and we don't know why. Answer. Prions are so difficult to destroy that after autopsy, all equipment has to be destroyed. Edit, they're not contagious, but most normal sterilization techniques won't remove them. 100-second edit. It's not that dead people get infected, it's that anything that comes into contact with the prions probably won't be 100 decontaminated before it comes into contact with a live person at a later, even much later time. Disinfectant procedures used for viral, bacterial, and fungal pathogens such as adult beverage, boiling, formalin, dry heat, 300°C, autoclaving at 121°C for 15 minutes, and ionizing. Ultraviolet or microwave radiation are either ineffective or variably effective against aggregated prions. Story 3. If you are HIV positive and have unprotected intimacy with someone else who is HIV positive but has a different strain of HIV, you risk something called superinfection. This is when your original strain of HIV meets a different strain of HIV to form a super strain of HIV. This new strain is sometimes resistant to HIV medications. Story 4. If you get priapism, an arousal that lasts longer than 4 hours and won't go away, the treatments are gruesome. Basically, if the blood in your male body part stays in there too long and can't get out, it becomes ischemic and starts to clot, which makes the problem even worse. It can't drain back out of the male body part back into the bloodstream. The treatment? Jabbing a big needle in your male body part and draining the blood. They can deaden it with anesthetic first, but that's just another needle that needs to go in first. The draining needs to be done multiple times, and if the blood is too thick for the needle to drain, or if the issue continues, the procedure is to then take a scalpel, shove it into the head of the male body part, ream it 90, and let the blood rush out. Here's a urologist roughly demonstrating the procedure, not on a person, thankfully. TLDR. The 4-hour warning on Viagra is serious business. And don't get bitten by a Brazilian wandering spider. Story 5. A body decomposed in a cistern on a hotel roof for days, while the guests drank and showered in the increasingly darkening water for days. This was Elisa Lam at the Cecil Hotel in LA. Answer. What's horrible is that the water was, like you said, slowly getting darker and darker. People didn't complain about it until it was a dark red, meaning that they noticed that the water was a little red but shrugged it off as nothing. Edit. I understand that rust can create discoloration in water, but from what I've seen from when I had rust pipes in my home, the water is a light brown tan-orange color, but not red-blackish like I'd imagine theirs would be. Story 6. There are tons of shoes near the Titanic. The reason for this is that once the ship hit the bottom of the ocean, corpses rained down around the wreckage. The fish ate the bodies, but no fish at that depth in that area can eat the leather that most shoes of the time were made of. Answer. I have read that this is a myth. The shoes are from canvas or cloth suitcases, sacks, and other forms of luggage. The canvas or cloth have rotted away, but the shoes remain. Most of the people on Titanic wore cork life belts when they ended up in the water. There were almost twice as many life belts as people on board. and would have drifted south with the current after freezing to passing in the cold water to sink many miles south of the Titanic. Story 7. On the torture rack. Additionally, if muscle fibers are stretched excessively, they lose their ability to contract, rendering them ineffective. One gruesome aspect of being stretched too far on the rack is the loud popping noises made by snapping cartilage, ligaments, or bones. Every time I think of this, I get freaked out. Story 8. As a geology student, I just learned that we are losing more topsoil than what is being produced. Soil takes at least 2,000 years to produce efficiently, and usually at 10,000 years for some parts of the world. Soil is what sustains us, our animals, and life on Earth. It's just as important as sunlight and water. Story 9. After the atomic bomb was dropped, there were some people who were close enough to have their faces melted, but not eliminate. So for a few days before they died of dehydration, they wandered around moaning with their mouths melted shut. Oh cool, this is my highest voted comment yet. Answer. I read a recent post on Reddit that the blast was so inefficient that it converted less than 10 of the uranium mass into energy. The rest was blasted apart into microscopic particles as fallout. It's terrifying to think that an atomic bomb that had a very small yield of around 14 kilotons was so destructive it flattened a big city and eliminated hundreds of thousands of people. Yet, it was only around 10 efficient. Fudge. Story 10. Babies in the womb can be startled and cry. However, there is no air, as their lungs and airways are filled with amniotic fluid until birth, and thus no sound. So babies are in there, silently screaming and sobbing if they get scared. Answer. While I was pregnant, I had to have these non-stress tests done twice a week to check on the baby's reactivity. Sometimes she would be napping, and therefore her heart rate wasn't doing what they needed it to do to show them that she was healthy and reactive. So, what do? They take out this little buzzer and buzz her awake. I could literally feel her jump and twitch, and her heart rate immediately increased by a lot. You could hear it thumping away on the monitor, poor thing. Edit. To clear some things up, I fully realize the buzzer isn't meant to be some medieval torture device for unborn children. It's the same concept as picking up your newborn baby while she's deeply asleep and startling her awake on accident. There's no harm done, and the baby is over it in a split second, but in that moment you feel bad because you startled them out of sleep. That's all. The test is a good thing. It looks for healthy reactivity and monitors the heart rate of the baby to make sure all is well, so totally necessary and definitely safe. Story 11. That the crew of the Challenger space shuttle didn't die instantly, but likely were alive and aware of everything up until the crew capsule hit the water at 207 meters of speed. Answer. The cabin hit the ocean surface at roughly 207 mph, 333 km/h, with an estimated deceleration at impact of well over 200 degrees, far beyond the structural limits of the crew compartment or crew survivability levels, and far greater than almost any automobile, aircraft, or train accident. Darn, what a way to go. Edit. Another high-speed crash into the ocean. Swiss Air Flight 111. At 22:31 AM, at 01:31:18 UTC, the aircraft struck the ocean at an estimated speed of 345 mph, 154 meters, or 299 knots, and with a force of the order of 350 degrees, causing the aircraft to disintegrate instantly. 16. The crash location was approximately 44243 N 635825 WTO coordinates. 44243 N 635825 W with 300 meters uncertainty. Story 12. The bystander effect. The probability of a person in need getting help is inversely proportional to the number of people in the vicinity. An example of this is a car accident. The more people there are around, the less likely it is that the victim will receive help. This is because each individual assumes someone else will do it. This is in contrary to what we think would happen. Story 13. You received the passing penalty for armed robbery in Sudan. But the scary part is that the official passing penalty for armed robbery in Sudan is crucifixion. Edit. For those curious, this is the penalty in North Sudan. I should have been a bit more clear. Generally, the crucifixion is held after the execution to display the offender's body as a form of intimidation to deter people from committing the crime. That being said, equally disturbing forms of capital punishment, such as stoning women for religious crimes, hanging, and retributive sentences carried out in the same manner of which someone caused passing are all legal. Answer. Sudanese law student here, so I guess I'm more than qualified to comment on this comment. Probably the first and last time I'll ever be relevant, so let me have my moment. Now, yes, UX quiet, Flight X is right and wrong at the same time. The punishment for armed robbery in Sudan is 3 years imprisonment. So if you rob a store at gunpoint, you'll get a max of 3 years. What you're referring to is highway robbery. I know English sources say armed robbery. It gets lost in translation. Or haraba in Arabic. It's very complicated, so bear with me. 1. The punishment is crucifixion, but that is after. The person is hanged, like a deterrent for other criminals. A small historical background for this harsh punishment. Haraba is a very, 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 very broad term. It means warfare if we literally translate it. It's from the Quran, and the ayah that discusses it deals about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling the Muslims that the punishment for those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger should be punished as accordingly, and then mentions crucifixion as one of the options, depending on the severity of the crime. 2. What does happen in Haraba? Haraba includes highway robbery, but it's the byproducts of it that lead to such a harsh punishment. During the time of the Prophet, Muharibs, committers of the act, would intercept caravans, eliminate the men, violation the women, and of course, plunder their goods. 3. The punishment has never been implemented here as far as I know. Judges always find loopholes. This is what the Quran instructed. 4. To prove my point to you, in mainstream Sunni Islam, some scholars unanimously agree that women cannot be crucified as they cannot commit violation and overpower their victims. I have so much more to say, and I know many of you are wondering what life is like on the third most corrupt country on earth. See Corruption Perceptions Index. Having a wanted war criminal for a president, one of the most expensive countries to live in, no joke, yet with the lowest GDP, feel free to PM me. I'm currently in Sudan. Yes, we do have internet. Edit. Punishments such as stoning, crucifixion, amputation are there, but they have never been implemented in Sudan's history. Story 14. Female hyenas have a pseudo-male body part. They actually give birth through this. Even more horrifying, approximately 60 of the cubs are actually suffocated and die attempting to leave the male body part. Ouch. Story 15. According to the writings of Valerius Maximus and Florus, the king of the Teutones, Teutobod, was taken in irons after the Teutones were defeated by the Romans. Under the conditions of the surrender, 300 married women were to be handed over as Roman slaves. When the matrons of the Teutones heard of this stipulation, they begged the consul that they might instead be allowed to minister in the temples of Ceres and Venus. When their request was denied, the Teutonic women slew their own children. The next morning, all the women were found dead in each other's arms, having strangled each other during the night. This act passed into Roman legends of Teutonic fury. Source: Story 16. Dogs love squeaky toys not because of how playful it sounds, but because after years of evolution, before eliminate their prey, which were mostly small animals like rabbits, they squealed in agony when being hunted down, thus letting the savage dog know that it was time for lunch. Good day. Answer: My dog is a Boston Terrier, Beagle, Pug mix. When she was 2, the second summer we had her, she had free reign of our backyard, which included a hill that was gated at the very top. That summer, she got into 3 rabbit nests. Our backyard was large, and because we did not have a dog until we got her, Penny, the rabbits that lived in the hills and mountains surrounding our home had decided our backyard was a safe place. No more. The Beagle and Penny had sniffed out the nests on 3 separate occasions, and each time she would dig out the babies and unfortunately chew on them like they were squeaky toys because they made the same noise as her squeaky toys. No more squeaky toys for our murderer after that. Story 17. The Cascadia subduction zone is long overdue for a rupture. When it does go, it is going to fudge shoot up. Everything west of I-5, from far northern California to southern British Columbia, is going to have a really rough time. Seismologists and geologists are laying odds on this happening within the next 50 years. This region is woefully unprepared to deal with the initial earthquake and tsunami, or their aftermath. This going to make Katrina look like a day at the park. Answer: To add to this, Seattle is especially at risk. Prior to modern day, the city was very hilly. 100 years ago, the hills were all blown up, and the resulting rubble was pushed into the Sound. Large portions of Seattle downtown adjacent to the Sound are built on that fill. In the event of a major earthquake, the fill could liquefy, destroying large swaths of the city. That and a large percentage of the city's buildings are made of unreinforced masonry. Those buildings will topple like blocks in the event of a major earthquake. Edit for maps: Seattle Fill Map, Seismic Hazard Map. Unreinforced Masonry Buildings Map article. Story 18. Koalas bears can give you chlamydia. Hold on before you get any wrong ideas here. They pass it by peeing on you, so if you get close to one of those cuddly bastards, it could end up very badly for you. So do not even think about touching those fur balls. Story 19. Just finished the book Fly Boys, recommended by fellow Redditors. When 150,000 Japanese soldiers were left for dead in Papua New Guinea, they resorted to some kind of short straw decision-making. The loser would always run, be shot, and then eaten by his fellow comrades. Story 20. Victor Marchetti, Special Assistant to the Director of Central Intelligence. A lot of money was spent. They slit the cat open, put batteries in him, wired him up. The tail was used as an antenna. They made a monstrosity. They tested him and tested him. They found he would walk off the job when he got hungry, so they put another wire in to override that. Finally, they're ready. They took it out to a park and pointed it at a park bench and said, "Listen to those 2 guys." They put him out of the van, and a taxi comes and runs him over. There they were, sitting in the van with all those dials, and the cat was dead. Story 21. That 42.3 of Londoners have less than 100 in the bank. 40? Hand to mouth. The only gets worse when you go north. Story 22. It's possible to accidentally eliminate yourself by cracking your neck like you do with your knuckles. Story 23. Misfortune can cause a human to become, of no will of theirs, less intelligent, less sane, and less of a good person. Story 24. There was a guy, and he had a tapeworm, and the tapeworm had cancer, and the cancer metastatized. and the worm's cancer cells frolicked all through the guy's body and took root and grew tumors in his lungs. And the tumors weren't made of human cells. They were masses of worm flesh. Then he died. Story 25. Scaphism. The intended victim was stripped naked and then firmly fastened within the interior space of two narrow rowing boats or hollowed-out tree trunks, joined together one on top of the other, with the head, hands, and feet protruding. The condemned was forced to ingest milk and honey, and more honey would be poured on him to attract insects, with special attention devoted to the eyes, ears, mouth, face, genitals, and anus. In some cases, the executioner would mix milk and honey and pour that mixture all over the victim. He would then be left to float on a stagnant pond or be exposed to the sun. The defenseless individual's feces accumulated within the container, attracting more insects which would eat and breed within the victim's exposed flesh, which, pursuant to interruption of the blood supply by burrowing insects, became increasingly gangrenous. The individual would lie naked, covered from head to toe in milk, honey, and his own feces. The feeding would be repeated each day in some cases to prolong the torture, so that fatal dehydration or starvation did not occur. Passing, when it eventually occurred, was probably due to a combination of dehydration, starvation, and septic. Shock. Delirium would typically set in after a few days. Edit. To all the people saying it's a myth, holy hell, I hope it darn well is. This shoot is mad fudge, yo. Answer. Tomorrow I suggest we all learn about the brazen bull. The brazen bull, bronze bull, or Sicilian bull was a torture and execution device designed in ancient Greece. According to Diodorus Siculus, recounting the story in Bibliotheca Historica, Perilos of Athens invented and proposed it to Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas, Sicily, as a new means of executing criminals. The bull was made entirely of bronze, hollow, with a door in one side. The bull was in the form and size of an actual bull and had an acoustic apparatus that converted screams into the sound of a bull. The condemned were locked in the device, and a fire was set under it, heating the metal until the person inside roasted to passing. Phalaris ordered the bull tested on its inventor, Perilos, but he wasn't allowed to die in it. Instead, Perilos was pulled out and then thrown off a hill. When Phalaris was overthrown by Telemachus, he was roasted in the bull. Phalaris was a generally terrible person, so don't feel too bad for him. He was noted for his cruelty, and if the legends are true, he literally ate babies and threw people into volcanoes. Story 26. If estimates are correct as to the level of people involved in child-adult content, consumption of rather than making of, there isn't enough space in prisons. Even if they emptied them first, if they were all caught and convicted. Edit. This would still be true if we emptied all the prisons first. This isn't an overcrowding, horrifying fact. Story 27. An ancient warrior and devastating general in the 14th century, Timur or Tamerlane, died at the age of 68, and inscribed on his tomb were the words, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble, and whoever disturbs my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." Joseph Stalin ordered the tomb to be opened on June 20th, 1941, and exactly 2 days later, on June 22nd, 1941, Adolf Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa and begins to invade the Soviet Union. This legend is called Tamerlane's Curse. Answer. He also called himself the Sword of Islam and the Light of the Faith, but eliminates 17 million people, most of whom were Muslim. That was 5 of the world's population in the 1400s. Also, he used to do some crazy siege warfare with all kinds of cool scare tactics. He razed Baghdad when they refused to surrender and built 2 towers of human skulls outside the city, each made up of 20,000 skulls. This guy was not a descendant of Genghis Khan but was way more evil. Edited for idiocy. I wrote a paper on him 6 years ago. Can publish online if anyone wants to read about him. Double edit. He also died on the road to wage a massive war with China because the Chinese emperor pissed him off. Story 28. My mother tried to eliminate me and herself when I was 3 months old. My dad was off on his first ever 40-day deployment. The thing that stopped her was that I began to cry when she started to smother me. She ended up taking down her hanging noose from the closet afterward. I saved her. I'm 32 years old and my father still doesn't know this happened. My mother privately admitted this to me out of the blue before dinner on my 26th birthday. Story 29. I have no idea what's written in any of the terms and conditions I've agreed to. Apple may very well have the rights to my firstborn son. Story 30. We can be obliterated instantaneously from something in space that we couldn't possibly see coming. Story 31. Whale corpses are washing to shore with stomachs full of plastic debris, implying that they are starving to passing on a full stomach. 21st century Holocene extinction. Story 32. That there are people who have been kidnapped, violation, and take down who will never be found, and that there are people being held against their own will as prisoners and intimacy slaves. This shoot disturbs me daily. I ache for them. I'd give anything to be able to help them. Story 33. I'm an aerospace materials engineer, and this is my favorite horrifying fact for people scared of flying. The melting temperature of the turbine blades in a jet engine is around 1600 K, and the temperature of the gas stream the blades operate in can exceed 1800 K. The only thing stopping the blades melting and causing catastrophic failure of the engine is a minuscule layer of cool air. In this context, cool is around 700-800 K, pumped out of tiny air holes to create a thermal boundary layer. TL.dr. The only thing between you and aircraft-related passing is less than 1 millimeter of air. Story 34. The majority of malaria deaths are children under the age of 5 and pregnant women. In 2015, there were an estimated 438,000 malaria-related deaths. Story 35. Mao Zedong thought he knew it all after he became the ruler of China. He told the people to eliminate the birds because they were eating their crops. They eliminate millions of birds, and that allowed insects to go unchecked and strip the fields. The resulting famine eliminated between 25 and 40 million people. During famines, the Chinese would drown baby girls and sometimes sell their bodies, which were hung up in the marketplace as monkey meat. Story 36. That we are being constantly bombarded with stellar radiation, and the only things protecting us is our dying atmosphere and a magnetopause. Space travel is deadlier the farther we go. Edit. Grammar for the grammar Nazis and information checks. Story 37. Heard this last time. The average 20-year-old has an expected lifespan of about 4,000 more weeks. Edit. All right, you guys are right. Doing the math, that's about 76 years. So in reality, you most likely have 1,500 or less weeks left. Even better. Story 38. Some rattlesnakes hibernate by coiling together underground, leaving you with the possibility of digging into a giant ball of snakes during the winter. Story 39. With almost 12,000 comments, it's bound to be listed in some form here because it is truly the most disgusting and horrific thing I've ever heard of. But in the Battle of Verdun in WWW1, there were people who died in shell craters full of toxic chemicals. This happened not because they were injured or disabled, but because scaling the sides was impossible due to all of the human fat, blood, and excrement that had saturated the ground. I cannot even begin to imagine how horrible it must be to die like that. Story 40. There are more slaves right now than there ever were in the US. Worldwide, there are 25 million slaves. That's almost the entire population of Canada. Edit. I am aware that the pop of Canada is 35 million. The comparison gives you a rough idea of the scale. There's no slave registry, and the estimates are between 21 million and, holy shoot, 46 million? Wow! And right now, there are slaves in the US and Canada. There are intimacy slaves working in Vancouver today. There are child slaves overseas harvesting shrimp, pineapple, tea, coffee, and chocolate. Odds are very, very high that you use something made by a child slave today. Edit 2. Wow, slavery apologists. I thought you folks were a myth. Story 41. When penguins can't find love, they